So welcome everyone who's joining us. And if you have any questions or you want to just check and make sure that your chat feature is working, drop something in there and send it to panelists and attendees. We'd like to, those of you who heard the discussion earlier, we have Amelia from Oklahoma, I'm from South Dakota, Rusty's in Colorado, Dorian's in Maryland, and Liz is in Alaska. To welcome everybody. Today your hosts are Dr. Rusty Lowe, Liz Berg, Dorian Janney, and our special guest, Amelia Cook. A quick mosquito observation update. So far this year, I'm just counting just this year, we've had 2,590 observations from 870 different sites. And of those observations, 174 of them have found larvae images. So congratulations. Keep it up. We're really pushing for as many larvae observations as we possibly can. From our webinar last month, Ryan Carney, our scientist looking for mosquito larvae observations, asked if anyone was interested in joining his training for larval masking, and he is looking for your help. If you are at all interested, the URL is listed on the screen, and the information to join the masking team is towards the top. So if you wouldn't mind, if you have some time or an interest, check that out. He would really appreciate your help. I'd like to introduce Amelia Cook. She's our featured presentation speaker today. She's a science educator in the Norman, Oklahoma school system and a gifted storyteller. Welcome, Amelia.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for inviting me. Let me switch over and share my screen and my sound. There we go. I had it kind of off to the side and I missed a button. Can you see it now? Okay, well, welcome. Happy Thursday afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to join you today. I am excited to share with you how we use Mosquito Habitat Mapper to engage our Native youth in a virtual STEAM camp for the Choctaw Nation Jones Academy. So Chokma, that's the Chickasaw word for hello. I am Amelia Cook, I am Chickasaw. I teach high school science in Norman, and I am a PhD student at the University of Oklahoma. In my graduate work, I'm learning about Indigenous science knowledge and researching tools of Native American storytelling to teach science. And the beautiful golden eagle that you see over my shoulder in this photo is Miyanabe, a magnificent bird, and meeting him was an experience that I will not soon forget. Let me introduce you.
This is Miyanabe. He is our 2.5 going on 3-year-old golden eagle. He came to us from a facility called SIA, Comanche Nation facility in Surreal. They had him after he was transferred from a rehabber. He was injured in Kansas. He tried to fly across a road and was struck by a vehicle. After some testing, they found out that he had lead poisoning, and that lead poisoning is what led to the muscle weakness and him not being able to fly well. And as a result of that, he can't see very well. So his Potawatomi name means sees poorly. The Comanche facility that had him, they had named him Puiwat, which is means can't see literally. There's a gentleman in their tribe that he's named after, and so we wanted to also honor him by giving him a name that reflected his Comanche name. And so we chose Miyanabe. And for us, it was important to give him a Potawatomi name because if you don't have a Potawatomi name, the creator can't see your face. And so since these guys can no longer fly high enough to look at the creator, we felt it important that he get a name. So we use him for education programs because of his limited vision. Sometimes that can be a challenge with an education bird, but they like the social interaction. We're not able to put him in an enclosure, a big flight enclosure, because he could injure himself. So we're able to keep him tethered like we do and take him out to do education programs. And so that interaction is good for him. And it's really nice to be able to take a live bird or a live eagle to a presentation and let people have that up-close interaction with a bird.
Oh, every time.
This is Miyanabe.
I told myself I wasn't going to do it, and I did it anyway. So I hope you enjoyed that. His coloring, and I don't know if you noticed how Miyanabe, how he looked around and was really taking it all in. And his Potawatomi name, means he sees poorly. But this incredible bird had such presence. And Miyanabe is where our story begins this afternoon. And I met him during a field trip with my Native Youth Science Club at Norman Public Schools. And this experience connected our group, the group that I brought to the Eagle Aviary, to the natural world in profound ways. My group of students that I brought with me were from diverse backgrounds, and not all of them were Native students. Yet we all felt Miyanabe's presence and shared a feeling of connection, and it was emotional. It was really interesting to see students reacted to him. It saddens me to tell you that Miyanabe has passed on. A statement on his website reads, "We are humbled to have been given the opportunity to be a part of his journey, and that he allowed us to share him with so many. We are heartbroken, but we will celebrate his life, the impact he had on us, our program, the community, and beyond. And we greatly appreciate his contributions to wildlife education and conservation." And I didn't anticipate starting our discussion on this somber note. I just learned of Miyanabe's walking on last week during a professional development teacher workshop that I attended at Citizen Potawatomi Nation. I wanted to use this picture of him, and as I was looking him up, his presence lives on. Miyanabe was not just a cultural experience, but a moment of shared connection and an opportunity to reflect on our human impacts and stewardship of the natural world. His injuries that contributed to his passing included being struck by a vehicle, lead poisoning from ingesting shot, and exposure to West Nile virus, the leading cause of mosquito-borne disease in the continental United States. Miyanabe continues to educate me and guide my journey. Here's a link to Miyanabe's bio from Citizen Potawatomi Nation's Eagle Aviary. If you're interested to learn more about their program and the other eagles there, I just added his bio in the chat. So feel free to head on over to their website and learn about the fantastic program that they have there at the Citizen Potawatomi Nation. So I met Miyanabe through my tribal education outreach work. I sponsor a Native American youth science club in our school district for students in 2nd through 12th grade. We gather once a month during the school year, usually on a Saturday, to do Native science. Our club engages in Native American cultural experiences and environmental science. We use storytelling, we make art, and we learn about traditional ecological knowledge. Our club is a member of 2019's NOAA's Planet Stewards community, and you can read more about our first project, which was called Cultivating Community, and the photo in the bottom left of your screen is from that activity. But you can learn more about their program on their website, and we hope to join Planet Stewards again. We just applied for the 2021 cohort. And this year's project is Keepers of Turtle Island, which the picture there in the bottom middle, which I'll explain here in a little bit, is kind of our mascot. The photo in the upper right of your screen is at Citizen Potawatomi Nation's Eagle Aviary. Miyanabe was only one of many eagles, and it's really hard to describe what an amazing experience this was. It was a powerful learning moment. On the bottom left, the students are building a paper mache turtle, which we've named Loxi, the Chickasaw word for turtle. He kind of serves as a diorama that models our local prairie ecosystem here in central Oklahoma. The project is ongoing, and it's one of my favorites. We start the club each year with the story of Sky Woman falling and creating earth on the back of a turtle shell with the help of many brave and caring animals. It's a creation story shared by many tribes. And it's an engaging narrative that gets students thinking about stewardship and the interconnectedness of life on our planet. We investigate ecosystems during the fall semester, and over time we're going to add landscape features like the Canadian River and the flora and fauna that we observe here in our local environment. It's really fun and engaging, and parents get in on the action too. The image on the bottom left is from Cultivating Community, and we are planting our first Three Sisters garden. And then finally, the image on the top left was a tour that we took to the National Weather Center, and that is one of their mobile radar storm vehicles. Our club, I wanted to share with you about our science club because it's a wonderful collaboration for educational outreach with tribes and the scientific community, and it's what led us to teaching the virtual camp for Jones Academy that we're discussing today. But our club is co-sponsored by the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center. I also work there as a graduate assistant. April Taylor, who's there in the pretty red dress, is a tribal liaison and climate scientist that helps me with tribal resources, activities, and connects us with Native STEM professionals and also the scientific community at OU. But the South Central Climate Adaptation Science Center, we call it the CASC, is a research consortium, and they serve New Mexico, Oklahoma, Texas, and Louisiana, and they partner with natural and cultural resource managers, providing science, tools, information to address the impacts of climate variability and change. The consortium includes the University of Oklahoma, Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, LSU, and the University of New Mexico, as well as the Choctaw and Chickasaw Nation of Oklahoma. And the South Central CASC is the only climate center with sovereign tribal nations on the consortium and 2 full-time tribal liaisons. Now, just quickly, there are 3 arms of the tribal engagement program at the CASC, and it goes beyond just youth outreach, but it includes tribal workforce development and building capacity and research partnerships with our tribal communities. The CASC offers K-12 Native STEM activities, engaging with tribal communities and really building relationships. The CASC team hosted a tribal health and climate training for tribal public health officials. The flyers there on the right, and it included many topics. And this is where we kind of developed an activity and how to introduce participants to vector-borne diseases and using the Globe Observer app for mosquito monitoring. So Chickasaw Nation student Jacob Nichols and researcher Kai O with the NASA Oklahoma Space Grant Program worked together to develop this curriculum that introduced our participants to mosquito habitat monitoring. And you'll see some of their work in our STEAM Camp curriculum that we are going to be talking about today. And our work is truly a collaborative effort. So, virtual STEAM Camp, Jones Academy. Jones Academy is a Native American boarding school that hosts an annual STEAM camp, so science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. And camp was almost canceled last year due to COVID. Our team had planned to do the mosquito activity that you just saw, but we had to adapt and shift our strategy to a virtual experience, which I'm sure is a familiar story to all of us at this point. So COVID schmovid, adapt and overcome. We had some challenges. Students were bummed. COVID was now taking away summer camp. There was more virtual instruction to look forward to. Zoom fatigue is very real. How do you engage students in a physical science experience that is relevant to them? And how do you do all of this during a pandemic? As I've learned, innovation occurs while riding the wave of chaos. So with great challenges comes great opportunity. We sent campers a pretty sweet supply box. Each student received their own cell phone microscope a few weeks before camp to explore with. We couldn't guarantee that students would have mosquito larvae nearby. All their students were at home. So we preserved specimen and sent each student a jar of larvae. And they had a few to play with, as soon as they got them, because of course they were opening them up and checking them out. And then there were a few for our activity a few weeks later during camp. And students and families really responded really well to these. They're these crazy creatures that we sent them, and it was really cool. They were already starting to engage in camp. Our OU students led their virtual clan, hosted discussion groups, and served as great mentors. And the reality of COVID gave us an opportunity to learn more about and discuss tribal public health and the impacts of the pandemic on tribes. And just adapting our science curriculum and adapting to change and teaching only could make us stronger. So it was important that we engage students before the first day of camp. There's always tech and stuff that they need to set up before they come to camp. So they needed one resource with all the information they would need for camp. And I will share a link to this document. I created a hyperdoc that has live links in it. And I will share that with you now in the chat. And please, this is a hyperdoc. Sharing settings should be open, but please travel on over to that document and kind of look through it as I kind of just explain it. The links should be live, so you're welcome to kind of click through and kind of explore how I set this up. But this document was emailed out to students a few weeks before camp, so they could ensure their technology was ready to go on camp day. I linked instructions for how to set up Google, how to sign up, and how to download the Globe Observer app. They had instructions for how to set up and use their microscopes. Students were going to be using Padlet, which is kind of like an online bulletin board, to post their work during camp. So I really wanted them to sign up and start exploring Padlet. And we had a microscope challenge where, explore your microscopic world and post, the coolest picture onto Padlet before camp. So I really wanted them to get used to using those tools. Handling and safety instructions for the larvae were also included. And I really wanted students to start thinking about native STEM. So native culture and STEM knowledge, as one concept and not two different terms. Native Americans are underrepresented in STEM fields, and they're on number 5. I linked a video of student in Lakota, Vaughn Vargas, and the name of his video was Protecting Lakota Culture with STEM. In this video, Mr. Vargas explains how traditional Native American culture and STEM have mutually beneficial connection. And towards the end of the video, he discusses Native researchers studying gene diversity and cattle introgression in the American bison population. And this video led students kind of to the cultural section of the pre-camp instructions, and it was a good segue to start thinking about Native STEM. Section number 6 was kind of the cultural section, but we shared a copy of the story that we were going to be focusing on during camp and had some discussion prompts for them to consider. And then there was an opportunity to create art. We added a PDF copy of the medicine wheel from the story, and this was for them to inspire them to make art or to print it off and color it. And then we also sent them some art supplies as well. But this document really set the stage for camp, got them prepared, and kind of mirrored the instructional sequence that we were going to follow. So our instructional sequence. Camp was a full day, and this was all virtual. So we had a morning session, lunch, and an afternoon section. And we wanted to make sure that kids were not just sitting in front of Zoom and they could interact. Our learning cycle began with our culture, with storytelling and discussion. I'll explain more how this was, how we guided our discussion here in just a moment. But after our cultural section, we followed a break, and the Jones Academy came in and they had students up and moving around. They were doing scavenger hunts and sharing their pets and lots of active, activities so that they were up and they had kind of a longer screen break. Our cycle continued and we engaged students in science. And this is where we did our mosquito identification, habitat monitoring, and learning about vector-borne diseases. They had lunch, and then we ended the day with our STEAM. So that's where we brought in our art focus. And we listened to a Science Friday podcast. I think it was in April is when this podcast was posted. And It was a discussion and an interview that just talked about the impacts of COVID on tribal communities and the challenges of tribal public health. And then we kind of spiraled everything that we learned over the day to explore Native art and communicating science to serve a tribal audience, to really serve tribal public health. So the student guide, this was a very, very important tool. And, you know, there were a lot of lessons learned at the end here, but this document became very, very important communication tool. And again, I have another link, which I will add. And same format. This is another Google Doc. But I know, you know, we can all relate to logging into a training or a professional development and trying to find this link or that file, or is it in an email? Is it on a document? And you have all these tabs and it can be kind of confusing. So I really wanted to make, you know, one resource. It was a hyperdoc, which just means it has links within this document for students that had all the information that they would need. So like I said, this is the same format that you saw in the pre-camp instructions, and all the resources, links, slides, rubrics, everything that students needed were linked in this one single document. And it was really helpful, like if students got disconnected from the meeting or everyone moved to a breakout room and lost the discussion questions. You know, we also included some really helpful frequently used diagrams also. And as I said, this tool really helped us guide our inquiry through the workshop, and this is something now that I incorporate in my classroom that's very helpful. And please follow along in the student guide and explore the materials as I kind of explain, you know, our lessons throughout the day. The links should, it goes in the same sequence, and the links should be live. So our day began with the driving question: how can we use our Native American culture and STEAM, so this art component, to protect and promote healthy tribal communities? And students were given an objective to create a public service announcement poster. And it was a challenge. Like, we judged them, ranked them, winners were chosen, and prizes were awarded. And it was important that the requirements for the poster had to inform the community of a public health concern, recommend appropriate steps, be culturally relevant and creative. And the idea was that this could be displayed in a tribal health clinic. So it really, we gave some examples there that you see on your screen for, you know, what students should be thinking about when you're thinking about a PSA, and how to make, you know, kind of an infographic that's relevant to tribal communities that you could just hang in a health office. And we started talking about what their objective was going to be, and this led into to our teaching. So there on your student guide, we moved students into breakout rooms to read and discuss our story, which was the buffalo bull and the cedar tree. And this is an Osage story about how nature provides what we need, and the importance of living in balance, and how the Osage accepted the cedar tree as their tree of life. Our OU students were mentors in each one of these breakout rooms, and they were there to help facilitate discussion. Now, for this first section, we used a Jamboard, which is a Google product. It's an interactive whiteboard, and it's really engaging, and it gets students interacting. You can use Jamboard for a card sort activity, collaboratively draw a model, work a math problem, change the background and create a graph. It's very interactive and collaborative. So I want you guys to interact with this Jamboard. So here comes another link. Now, only, I think 25 or 30 people are allowed to collaborate at a time. So I'm sorry if you're not able to join us, but I will switch over on my screen so that you can see what's happening. And so please jump in there. And this is kind of what we used to help facilitate our discussion. And if you're following along on the student guide, there's also a link on the Jamboard, and I added it in the chat. But again, it limits the amount of people that can collaborate on a time. But this is an example of a collaborative activity that we did. We built a food web. So those of you that are on the Jamboard, please explore. Click the sticky note level on the left side of the screen. So right here, and you can type in an organism that belongs in a prairie ecosystem. So we'll say a prairie, if I can spell it right, prairie chicken, right? And you just click save. And as you guys can see, you guys are fast learners. You can move these around. You can add different things. You can also click on this icon that has the two mountain peaks. And I have all my students click on Google image search at the top, so you can make sure that you're doing you're following copyright guidelines. And you can, let's see, prairie chicken, and just type in an image of an organism you want to add to this food web. So look at that cute little dude. We'll add him. There we go, right? And then as you guys can see, you can add different images, you can sketch. You can also use the pen tool to connect, show the energy flow, to connect the different elements that you're adding on the board. And you guys are so awesome. You're clicking around and exploring, but it's great. That's what's great about Jamboard. And the students, like, I don't know if it's just because there are things to click on and do, but students really interact with this. And you can, let's see here. You can also click the arrows up here at the top that will move you between frames. And you'll see that on frame 2, this was from our workshop. We had these discussion prompts ready to go on the Jamboard. And as groups were reading the story, they would come and they would add information to the prompts on there. And it's kind of like a Google slide. It's not as editable as a Google slide, but as you can see, it's very interactive and very engaging. It gets students to kind of, like wake up and contribute their thoughts. So after students kind of discussed the lessons learned and we talked about ecology, we eventually got an ecosystem with a mosquito. So right here on frame 3 is an example of one that we worked on. And, it took a little guidance, but we eventually had a food web that had a mosquito in it. And this was a great segue to discussing our next science learning cycle. And it really helped facilitate some interesting discussions and address some misconceptions about mosquitoes. So feel free to keep playing on that. I'm going to switch back over to our presentation. Oops, show in presentation mode. Wonderful. So students discussed, the characters and the main themes of our story that we were discussing, and the symbology in Native American storytelling. And it led to this discussion of the medicine wheel and how these are teaching tools to help people remember significant events and the cyclical nature of life. After our cultural section, kids had a break, and then we came back and we began our mosquito monitoring cycle. And this is where students explored mosquito-borne diseases. We looked at species that were found specifically in Oklahoma, where to find mosquito habitats, how to identify larvae. So this is where they got to use the microscopes and the larvae we had sent them. And then the students were pretty jazzed about contributing data to real scientific research. They were really into this activity. And then after lunch, we came back and we ended the day with discussion in breakout rooms of what tribal public health is and how we can communicate science effectively to our tribal communities. Students gave and received feedback on poster ideas and had a few days to work on them. There were other days of teaching throughout the week. And then at the end of the week, we had our poster challenge. And here are a few examples of their PSAs. And I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention to the chat, but I did just happen to see what age group were the campers. These specifically were high schoolers. So for this STEAM camp, it was all high school. Our Native Youth Science Club, where we do similar activities, we have 2nd grade all the way through 12th grade. So we kind of have all ages, but specifically for this activity, it was just high schoolers. But here are 3 examples of their PSAs. And I was really excited about how different their posters were and, what students incorporated different elements of our learning cycle. And over here on the left, so this was safety measures related to COVID about social distancing. And then something that we didn't even discuss, but over here on the right, another student made a PSA about another vector-borne disease, Lyme's disease, carried by ticks, and it's a very important issue in our area. And so, another student went in a different direction and did their own thing. And then this one in the middle, this trauma tree, I really responded to this one. The cedar tree from our story became the Osage tribe's tree of life. It's a common symbol with many cultures. And she really made this, I love that it was like, this social emotional health, and that she incorporated this art of the tree and kind of made it her own. But you can still see the elements of our workshop in the students' work. And by the time they got to this point in their workshop, we were on Monday and this was Friday of the same week. So I was really excited to see how, this really, set with students and how they really thought about it. So it was a really enjoyable experience. So of course, there were lessons learned. The most important from a teacher's perspective that I got from this there were several critical communication tools that we used. The student guide with all the resources in one location, the interactive Jamboard during breakout room discussions, and using Padlet to share student products. We were all in different geographic locations, and being able to share student work, whether it was a picture or a PDF or whatever, and leave comments and everything was really, really helpful. Next time going forward, I'm going to ask, Jones Academy is sponsored by the Choctaw Nation, but there are many different nations represented with the students there. So next time I would like to know what specific tribes are represented, so that I can find resources that are relevant to the actual students that I have. And different tribes, there's kind of a perennial philosophy. There are a lot of common themes in the stories, but I like for that one student to be like, oh, that's my tribe, and hear their tribe story. So next time I think it'd be really helpful to know which tribes I'm working for. Now, I also want to create language, and this is something I've started doing with my science curriculum. Many tribes are losing native language speakers, and it's also interesting because not all tribes have words for some of these concepts. Some of the tribes that we worked with in Alaska, some of our tribal communities didn't have a word for mosquito because they haven't historically had mosquitoes in their environment before, and it hasn't really been part of their culture. And another important lesson learned was that when you're working with tribal communities, their perspective on management, not all tribes may consider mosquitoes as a pest, and using chemicals such as pesticides or commercial, like bug spray that has DEET in it to manage mosquito populations may not be appropriate. And tribal communities are more likely, like I said, to consider mosquitoes as an important part of their environment. So the tribal perspective and kind of that holistic view of nature is important to consider when working with tribal communities. And then, so STEAM Camp 2021, we are in person this year, and we are continuing this work with Mosquito Habitat Monitor. I'm sending students supplies and a link to Dr. Lowe's video demonstrating how to build a mosquito trap. And this video can actually be found on their webpage, so observer.globe.gov. And you go to do Globe Observer and then mosquito habitats. And there are a lot of fantastic resources on there, a few that I'm talking about here. But there's a video that takes you through how to build this very simple mosquito larva trap. So I want students to collect their own specimens. And at the end of the video, I really like that they have students designing their own experiment. So what different components can they change? What can they change about the different liquid they put in there that maybe attracts more or less mosquitoes? So I'm really excited about this activity. And then there's a, I guess like an interactive notebook, the Mosquito Larva Hunters. We will be using this, and it's a really cool guide to help students find and identify larvae. And we're using these activities to teach phenology. We'll be using some fantastic equipment that Jones Academy has to study weather and climate and investigate nature's calendar and how this relates to mosquitoes. There are some awesome stories also that I'm researching that teach, when to plant certain crops and kind of connect with this study of phenology. So check out the resources there. And before we part, there are a few points that I want you to consider. Native American students are underrepresented in STEM fields and fall in, what we call in the educational field, the achievement gap. And in part, this is due to how science is taught. Does modern science education consider Indigenous science as serious, as an ancient body of applied knowledge for sustaining communities and ensuring survival over time and through generations? All students respond to stories and experiences with nature, and all students can benefit from Indigenous science education. And this is kind of where my journey begins with my doctoral research. There are new strategies to teach NGSS, so the next generation science standards. For three-dimensional learning, they suggest storylining, which is bundling lessons to fit into a story. So students retain knowledge and it's more authentic. And, to kind of have this overarching narrative to kind of put these science lessons into this overarching story. And Indigenous cultures have been doing this for millennia. So it's an opportunity to rediscover and apply the tools of storytelling. And then just a few recommendations for working with tribal communities. Educate yourself about tribal sovereignty and self-determination, ethical practices for working with tribal communities, increase knowledge and awareness of Native ways of knowing and Indigenous science knowledge. And everything is truly connected. And challenge yourself to new ways of thinking about Indigenous science, community building, and education as a tool. What I'm discovering in my research is there's some power and there's some overlapping connections here that are really worth diving into. And as our time nears its end, Miyanabe and I want to share with you the 7th generation principle. So it's a Native American philosophy that decisions we make today should result in a sustainable world 7 generations into the future. Now, this is from Chief Lyons, which is the Onondaga tribe. In our way of life, in our government, with every decision we make, we always keep in mind the 7th generation to come. It is our job to see that the people coming ahead, the generations still unborn, have a world no worse than ours, and hopefully better. When we walk upon Mother Earth, we always plant our feet carefully because we know the faces of our future generations are looking up at us from beneath the ground, and we never forget them. Thank you so much for your time. I'm not sure how we're doing on time. I think we might have some time for questions. I'm gonna stop sharing here.
We do have some time for questions, and what I'd like to do is, if there is a question, for people to raise your hand and I'll unmute or give you the option to unmute, and so you could ask Amelia your question. So if there are any questions. But that was an amazing presentation. You're the best storyteller. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that feedback. I'm just starting. I'm actually working with my tribe to become an official storyteller, because there's a lot of pacing and what you do with your voice. So I'm really trying to work on it. But thank you so much for that feedback.
What incredible training that you can use across your whole field. That's wonderful. So pacing, wow, was really good. So yeah, so love to hear from people to find out.
How about if I would like to hear more about how they can work second graders through seniors. I'd like to hear more about how they work those kids together.
Okay, so at first, so this will be our 4th year doing it. And our first year, so the science club in our school district had already existed. And then when I came in, it hadn't been active for a couple of years. And I really wanted to revitalize it. We have all these amazing resources with the University of Oklahoma. So that was kind of the format to begin with, is that it was, available for all students in our district. So I really wanted to make sure that we stuck by that. And the first year it was kind of chaotic. But as we're developing, what I've been doing is I teach AP Environmental Sciences. So I'm a high school teacher. So part of what I teach environmental science, a part of their grade is their outreach. So how are they using what we do in the classroom? How are they communicating that with our community? With our community. And they have an opportunity, they come and they help me with Native youth, and they are mentors. And so we also have our Native American clubs at both of the high schools here in town, and they come. And so they're also interacting with the activities, but we set them up kind of as bigs and littles. And so they have like this partnership and this mentorship that they kind of have their partner in their little group that they work with all year long. And sometimes I kind of think that helps with retention, because they know that, their high school student, their buddy is going to be there. And it really helps. We kind of split it up in stations. So when you come to the group, there are different stations that you kind of work. Like we always start together and we tell our story and talk about it. And then you go to your different stations and then we kind of wrap up. But the whole time I have my high schoolers kind of helping me with it. So that's kind of right now how we're kind of incorporating everybody.
We have 65 schools in our district, and soon to be 67, because we're opening 2 new high schools next year.
Wow.
But we're trying to figure out ways for like the high schoolers to be like mentors for the middle schoolers, and the middle schoolers to be like mentors for the elementary kids. And I didn't know if maybe you worked like that when you did the STEAM project. That looked very interesting to me. Thank you so much for a beautiful presentation, and I intend to share this.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. The mentorship has really been a key difference. Now, I do kind of incentivize my high schoolers that come from my APES class because it is part of their grade. But like when we met Miyanabe, they were the Golden Eagle. There were so many different diverse students there, but it didn't matter your background. Every student was in awe of what we were experiencing. And so, it's for my Native students. It's a science club for my Native students, but all of my students kind of benefit from it. And it's also an opportunity for them for scholarships and for their college applications, that they have like this volunteer opportunity. So it's been really helpful.
Let me cycle back to a question that is, what are your suggestions for creating content based on local tribes?
Well, and so goes my doctoral research. So that's where I'm beginning my journey. So I'm a science teacher. So when I approached curriculum, I base it on a phenomena. So I know, there's a certain phenomena that I'm looking for, and I teach everything in a cycle, and I try to make sure everything connects back to what the learning objective is. So I identify first with what's the science that I'm going to teach, and then I go and I take a deep dive into research, and I try to find different stories that, either reflect that phenomena or kind of explain, other things that are associated with it. And what I'm starting to do, part of my work is I'm working with elders, and I am trying to create, I say database, but that's far more sophisticated than where I'm at right now. But I'm trying to organize some of these traditional stories by phenomena or by, what the cast of characters are, so that when I go to create curriculum and I know that I'm working with bison or eagles and I want to look at ecology or I want to look at nutrient cycling, that I kind of have that database to reference. But right now it's just, if I know what tribe I'm working with, I'll reach out to them, to their cultural offices, and they're usually a whole lot of help. And like I said, I want to start engaging elders, and just kind of start collecting some of these stories. Something that we do in Norman with our youth group is we invite elders to attend our meetings with us. And at the end of the year in May, we have a fire ceremony at a local Native American church. And we have a potluck, and the students kind of share, and they tell the story of what we've done over the year. And it really becomes like a story sharing evening of like sharing culture and stuff. And I'm like furiously writing down notes of the stories that I'm hearing. But it is a challenge, and it really takes research, but I try to organize it by the science content, and then how can I put that in like a narrative vehicle for students.
Kind of along those lines, what steps would you recommend that educators take to partner with tribes and engage with Native youth to develop these types of programs?
Ooh, I mean, just throw it out there. Send those emails. The cultural centers, their education departments. And there are a ton of people doing this work. And as you can see, I started when I was working on my master's degree. I worked here at the CASC at the Climate Center, and then I went to teach high school, and I've still been working with the Climate Center, and over time kind of networking with the different tribes and educational communities. There are a lot of people doing this work, and a lot of people doing fantastic work. So sometimes I think it's just throw it out there that you're interested and that you want to collaborate. And I think that you'll find that many people are receptive to that. And I am too, always. Like my tribal liaison, April Taylor here, she has a fantastic network of resources. So shoot us an email, and we'll try to connect you and find resources for you.
What steps would should an educator take to get permission from tribes to share stories appropriately at the right time and in the right way?
Very, very good question. And this is my developmental area, and something that I am very aware of. And I think it's just communicate with whatever tribe you're working with. And like I said, there's always a contact person at their cultural centers that you can shoot an email or shoot them a phone call, and kind of you always want to discuss what the objective is of your project, and what your outcomes are. And it's always important to your learning is a lifetime goal. We're always learning, and approaching it as you're a learner and out of respect, and you're asking permission, I think is very, very important. But really just contacting the tribes, and they'll kind of guide you on that path.
Thank you. If there are any other questions, please put them in the chat. Barbara, would you like to? You're still able to ask your question if you'd like to.
Oh no! I'm just so amazed and happy to hear everything that this doctoral candidate has to offer. It's going to be wonderful. We use robotics when our kids are studying STEAM. We have used robotics for the past couple of years. We use those Lego robotics, and they learn how to program and code and that sort of thing when they're young. And the older kids use the VEX robotics, and then they can have competitions with those. And what makes it really different for us, I think, is that we have, like I said, a large district, and we have 43 tribes represented among our students. And although most of our students are Omaha and Oglala, that's only a few hundred of each of those. And then, so it's just, we also try to use the various tribes, but it's really difficult to pin down one for a unit. This is so useful, and I can't wait to see what you do once you get through the institution.
I'm actually Dr. Cecilia Hernandez from New Mexico State University in southern New Mexico. I knew that there was a partnership, but because I'm in southern New Mexico, we don't have really or I don't, in the College of Education have connections with University of New Mexico, which is in Albuquerque. But my question was, I'm interested in working with people to develop NGS, to build NGSS storylines that are related to those critical concepts that our young people need to know, that are aligned with Native perspectives and Native learnings. It's something that I've been trying to work towards. I've worked a lot with culturally responsive teaching, and I worked a lot with Spanish language students and English language learners. But being in the state of New Mexico, we do have several tribes and pueblos communities here in the state, and I think that it would be very, very good for my pre-service teachers to have exposure to that kind of learning, to know that that there are other ways of teaching science.
Oh my gosh, it's so nice to meet you, and I'm so excited to hear this. The University of New Mexico was actually just added to our consortium here recently, so that's a new partnership with us. But we have a tribal liaison just for your area, Cynthia, and she's literally just starting last week. But I will share my email with you, and absolutely, I definitely 100% want to collaborate. This is my jam, so to speak. This is what I'm really passionate about right now and really excited to work on, because I really, there's power in storytelling, and the new NGSS standards of storylining, like putting those two worlds together, I think could be very effective science education. So, and I think it would be wonderful for pre-service teachers as well. So yeah, let's connect. It's very nice to meet you, and that's very exciting.
Thank you. It's nice to meet you as well.
Share information on our next webinar, which is July 8th. And I hope you all come back, because it's the Mosquito Habitat Photo Challenge preview webinar. And we have lots of new information on how to take and do land cover and mosquito observations and benefit your community.
And I just added my my university email in the chat. So so please reach out and let's get cracking. Collaboration is key. I love collaborating. It takes a village, and there's so many people that have so much to offer. So please reach out to me, and we'll make this a thing.
We're super excited that you were able to join us today, and thank you so much for the wonderful storytelling. Anything else from our team?
Just an absolutely phenomenal presentation. There's nothing like listening to fellow teachers and, hearing the respectfulness and the honor for which they take on the responsibility of engaging young minds, and, the creativity and the passion through which you do it. I rarely see this from professionals who are not teachers at heart. And I must say, I feel such a kinship just in hearing what you shared, and I just send my being incredibly impressed and very happy for the future generations, that your care, your commitment, your energy is focused on making the world a better place. So I thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to cry, so I'm not going to say anything else, but thank you.
I see one last question that came in. Are there any recommendations you have on how to learn to be a good storyteller?
Honestly, I don't know that I'm informed enough yet to adequately answer that question. I've reached out to my tribe. Every tribe has, official storytellers and, keepers of the knowledge. So if you're Native, reach out to your tribe, and this storytelling goes beyond Native Americans, and we heal with stories, and stories are teachers. They're teaching tools. So I encourage you just to do some research about storytelling in general. One of my favorite authors, Kurt Vonnegut, has a short little lecture about how every story has a similar pattern, and a similar formula. And, there are different tropes, but they all kind of follow a similar path. And as a science educator, when I'm studying this, it's the same kind of learning path of, adapting and changing and adding to your knowledge. So that's kind of as I'm learning. As I learn things, I'll share things. But my only recommendation at this point is to reach out to your tribe. And sometimes there are training programs and stuff like that. And always YouTube. I mean, I taught myself to crochet on YouTube.
Well, and as Barbara mentioned, you have to listen to the stories and then ask the storytellers to tell you stories.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, thank you all for spending time with us, and thank you, Amelia, for being a wonderful storyteller and sharing it with our group. And then thank you to the Mission Mosquito team for putting it all together.